There's a hypothesis that I don't rule out, I don't rule it out at all, raised by some historians and, well, also by some works of fiction, but that's okay. There's always a hypothesis that Judas was a revolutionary who became disappointed with Jesus's peaceful approach. Judas, as a revolutionary, wanted blood. If Jesus wanted to change the world with love, Judas preferred to do it with weapons. And then we start to consider the possibility that Judas was a Sicarius. Remember Judas the Galilean? About 30 years earlier, he founded the Zealots, a popular uprising against the Roman occupation. It's still a revolt. We could call it more political, even though it's violent. The Sicari are the radical version of the Zealots. They will even use terrorism. Some say they are the first terrorists in history. It's curious. Terrorism was born within Judaism. That's undeniable. The Sicari looked for large public gatherings, moments when there were lots of people in the streets to kill prominent people and draw attention to their revolutionary cause. And then, guys, look how interesting this is. Now, about the nickname, it's a nickname. What is Iscariot in Judas Iscariot? Last names didn't officially exist at that time, so in the nickname or the informal last name that was given to Judas the traitor, we have a clue or a possible clue to understand the motivation, which is the big question we're bringing here today in our meeting. Back then, it wasn't common for people to have unusual names. What is Iscariot? It doesn't tell me anything. You were usually identified first by your father's name. Remember John, son of Zebedee, James, son of Zebedee. Both of them are sons of Zebedee and are known by their father's name. In the Arab world, even today, men are known by the name of the son. It's interesting, by the name of the firstborn. So I have a friend who is Abu Muhammad. He doesn't go by his own name anymore. He's known because he's the father of Muhammad. And that's how it goes. So kinship is very important to identify who a person is. But Judas came to be called Iscariot to be distinguished from other Judases who appear in the New Testament. One of them, as I already mentioned, is the one who is presented as the brother of Jesus. Now, what can this name teach us about Judas? Iscariot? Can anyone tell me what Jacqueline is saying? Iscariot is the place he came from. You learned that from Rodrigo Alvarez. I don't think it was with me, Jacqueline. I might have shown you that this was a hypothesis. Is that right? The surname Iscariot is commonly associated with a city that existed in the south of Israel, which was Iscariot. It was the city of Iscariot, the village of Iscariot. Actually, is was added because is means man, so it would be the man from Iscariot, the one who came from Iscariot, so it would be Judas Iscariot. But it's curious that Jesus is called Jesus of Nazareth, not Jesus, the man of Nazareth. Just from that, it already sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? People were called so-and-so from such place, not the man from such place. But all right, let's suppose that's a possibility. This city is mentioned in the Jewish Bible in the Old Testament as being part of the south of Judea. That would make Judas something of an outsider because the other followers of Jesus are Galileans, so he would have come from outside. The Gospel of John ends up confirming, taking this hypothesis that Iscariot could be a place because he talks about Judas's father in John 6-70. He says the following: Jesus answered them, "Did I not choose you, the 12? Yet one of you is the devil." He was referring to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. The Gospel of John mentions Simon Iscariot as the father of Judas. He also gives him a nickname or surname, the same as his sons. So the first question is whether, since John wrote in the 2nd century, he isn't actually talking about the father, borrowing the nickname he knows from the son, and not the other way around. Going from Simon Iscariot to Judas Iscariot, it's possible that the author of the gospel was only referring to Judas. Judas's father referred to by Judas's nickname instead of his own. That's a possibility. Anything is possible here, but if we stick to the idea that both Judas and his father have this nickname or surname, because of the city, we have two problems. Iscariot had vanished during Jesus' time. All right, I'll do it now. He comes from a vanished city. It doesn't make much sense, does it? And the other question, so here, it's unlikely that someone from far away would join a group from Galilee, which spent most of its time in Galilee, and be accepted into that group. Then comes another theory which emerged last century, which is also interesting, and then everything can make sense. Kariotes would be a corruption of Kiriath. Even today in Hebrew, there is a city, for example, called Kiriath. Arba means number 4, so it's city 4. So if Iscariot were Judas's last name, he would be the man from the city. That makes a bit more sense, folks, because if the Galileans are the rural men, men from farther out, from the countryside, Judas was the man from the city. And now I'm going to ask you to tell me in the comments, which city was that? Where would Judas come from? Who would dare to say he was coming from Jerusalem? That's the hypothesis of some recent historians, that it was the big city of that time. That someone should say this guy comes from the city. He's a city man. He's not a man from the countryside, not a man from the rural areas. He's a city man. It was Jerusalem, as was asked here, as Fernanda Teixeira said. But we're investigating, and we won't be satisfied with a hypothesis that just seems to make sense, even if it seems to make sense. Yeah, just a little bit of evidence, very little evidence, it could be. So we go back to the idea that the name Iscariot might be a corruption. Someone already mentioned it here in the comments. People are getting ahead. Very good. Who was it that said that? Look, Nilva Castro de Souza said Sicarius. No, someone said it before. Nady Camargo said it comes from Sicarii. That's a big possibility. Guys, do you remember that I said that when Jesus was a boy, they killed Judas? The Galilean founder of the Zealots, the Sicarii, are a branch, a splinter group of the Zealots. They came next, started doing what he did, and kept growing. It's true that they will become even more important after the time of Jesus, and they will commit even more violent acts later, but they are already active. So the name Iscariot would be totally related to the fact that Judas may have been or continued to be a Sicarius. Now look how interesting this is, which supports this theory. Normally, for us to try to prove a theory, there have to be several pieces of evidence. One is not enough. We're seeing some here, but I find another one especially interesting. Who are, can you tell me, the 2 disciples of Jesus who have nicknames? I'm not talking about saying son of Zebedee, because that's not a nickname, that's a reference. The 2 who have some mention of what they are, where they come from. Different from being someone's son, only someone can tell. Out of the 12, one of them we already know. One who had a nickname was Judas Iscariot. And who was the other one who had a nickname? What was his nickname? Then Anna Claudia Govato said there, look, it's Simon, Simon the Zealot, or Zealot, Luke 6 Gospel. Let's check here. Look, Simon, to whom he named Peter, and Andrew. Is he talking about who the 12 apostles are? Simon, to whom he added the name Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, and Simon called the Zealot. Look how strong this is, Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. Only 2 have nicknames. Look at this, guys. One is Simon the Zealot, and the other is Judas the Sicarius. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? One of Jesus' apostles was a zealot. We're already being informed. Couldn't the other be a Sicarius? They would have some things in common with Jesus' preaching, in the sense that they also denounced the corruption in the Temple of Jerusalem. They were against what the priests did, giving themselves over to power. They were in many ways likely to support Jesus. It makes perfect sense for our investigation here to think that Judas was one of the Sicarii, a dissident branch of the Zealots. There is no 100% certainty for any of these theories. My view, my research over 10 years now, reaching 15 years, studying Christian history leads me to believe, and more I believe, that Judas was a Sicarius. His being a Sicarius doesn't guarantee what I'm about to say, but it could be a possible motivation. That, for a Sicarius who wanted a violent revolt against Rome, Jesus, preaching love and not doing anything in terms of violence against Roman oppression, might have bothered Judas. to the point where he says, look, Jesus is getting more and more popular. There are thousands of people following Jesus, and he's talking about loving your neighbor. How is this going to harm the struggle of the Sicari and the Zealots if by talking about loving your neighbor, Jesus' followers become satisfied or complacent with the Roman occupation? So it is possible, yes, to think that as a Sicarius, Judas might have been bothered by Jesus' preaching, with the path that group was taking.